afternoon once again. My name is Vulindlela. I work for South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI. I will be your facilitator for this session. This session is mainly for the report back on what we saw on the field. The field visit and site visit that we were embarking on today, they form part of this Indaba. So it's very important for us just to get a feedback on what we saw. And then it will give it will benefit for those who did not go to other sites, just to see what is happening on the other side. We had about 3 sites. One site, site 1, it's in Swayimane, where there is climate smart agriculture that is happening there. And then the second site being Ward H of Vulindlela, of Vulindlela. That's where I was. And then the third site, unfortunately, it's a bit far. People who went to site 3, which is in Richmond, and then also in Nhlazuka area, it's a bit far. So they're still on their way. But with for the sake of time, we've decided that let's do the report back from Swayimane and then also from Vulindlela, so that we will be able to keep time. Because later today, there's going to be a gala dinner. You'll see me in a white suit today, so please do come. Without any further ado, I will give to uKZN, maybe just to give a report back on what they saw at Swayimane, and then also I believe maybe the group members that they were with her, they will also be able to fill in gaps if there are any gaps in terms of what they saw. Thank you. Over to you, KwaZulu-Natal.
Hi, everyone. My name is KwaZulu-Natal. I'm the project facilitator for uMngeni Resilient Project. I'm working in Swayimane. So today we went to Swayimane with my group. Our first stop was at Swayimane High School, where we were warm welcomed by the principal. And then we had a presentation by Alista about the lightning early warning system and also the weather station. From there, we went down to the garden to see the water harvesting method at the school. We met the community and the farmers who were working at the garden, who are part of that garden. And we discussed a lot of URP interventions, such as the trainings that has been facilitated, the climate smart agriculture practices that have been put in place by farmers and that has been facilitated through the projects. And then we stopped by a Mama Tukwala's plot, which is a homestead garden. Initially, we went to the school, which is the communal garden, and there's an early warning system and other equipment, climate smart equipment that were invested by the projects. Then we went down to the homestead garden, because one of the highlights in the projects is that farmers, there are a lot of dynamics when they work in communal garden. Therefore, we still encourage them to focus more on their homestead gardens for their food security purposes. And then in Mama 2, we also demonstrated the farmers. Mama Kwaza demonstrated the hand tiller, which is one of the investment done by the URP, which help farmers to do their land preparation. It reduces the cost of land preparation, and it's also help them because land preparation is labor intensive. And then furthermore, we went down to the irrigation system, the irrigation garden, where the project is trying to install the irrigation system. The installation is still ongoing. but we were able to see some crops there. And we further, our last stop was when we went to Mam Gas's garden, where we saw the tower garden, as well as planting in the tunnel as well. So basically our trip to Swayimane was more of looking at different climate smart agricultural practices. So that is what we've been seeing when we were going from one farmer to the next. Any highlights from my group? Anything that was the highlights from the trip? Oh yeah, we were walking a lot because the bus couldn't go to the fields, so.
So thank you very much, Katie, for taking us through to the activities in Swayimane. Sorry, I'm a Pretorian, so I might not pronounce certain things properly. So in a nutshell, I think my reflections from the trip are mainly around perhaps the project team should just document the lesson learned through, or rather the challenges and lesson learned through implementation of CSA in rural communities, so that those who are also aiming to upscale CSA can take in some form of knowledge exchange. And I think essentially the key stakeholders need to be part of the project from inception point, particularly in this case, if you're looking at sustainability, you look around and the Department of Agriculture, particularly extension, is not there. And if you are aiming to say this particular women that we're empowering, we want them to also sustain themselves, and also township, or rather rural economy, who's going to support them? So those key stakeholders need to be part of the project, so that when, like now, when the project ends, there's somebody who take their hands. So yeah, I think essentially that's my contribution, and I'm quite happy with the visit. I expected more, but we understood that the current harvest is particularly facing other stuff. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Okay, we've got another hand. The lady there mentioned a very critical thing, which I think is going to come out of this project, the lesson learned. There's quite a lot that we've learned. Maybe I didn't say at the beginning, I was part of this project. And there's quite a lot of lesson learned that has come out from implementing the project, especially around climate smart agriculture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else. No, I think it was very inspiring, and like the colleague of mine who've just spoken now, the passion on its own, starting from Ketiwe's passion, the passion that was demonstrated by the project participants, I think it's something that one could take home if one could be able to always get that kind of commitment and participation. And interestingly, the way the trip was tailored is that it was very integrative, in that we started with some fancy technology of a combined climate, what is this thing, lighting detector, weather station, and all that thing. And the benefit that it actually brings to the community, I think for me, that was a highlight. And the focus on what will actually bring food on the table of the in the people's homesteads and all that thing. So for me, I think, thank you very much. I think it was awe-inspiring, and it was well worth the time we took there, the walking as well. We accept that some of us haven't walked in a long time, but thank you very much, colleagues, for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it feels like there was some exercising that was happening at Swayimane. I'm very glad, and sir, they mentioned the issue of passion. I know I've worked in Swayimane. We've got like passionate farmers, not just farmers, young farmers that are very passionate about agriculture. So yeah. Is there anything maybe anyone you want to add? There's a gentleman there who want to say something.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very first on the we have farmers who bring their produce in their so that when they produce this business, you know where to sell. Sometimes we produce things without enough farmers and that was the high point. I hope you build that case before the project ends.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, I think access to market was one of the things that guided the project. Things like if these farmers they produce these farmer movements, who are they going to sell it to? So the access to farmers form basis of this project.
There seems to be some questions on the check for some they can also check plans. But not because we are there.
I know.
No, thanks. Just a quick question, Utabanoga Kambo. If you were to say these are the key lessons that were learned from the CSA in Swayimane, what will those be?
So for me, there are a lot of trainings, even if from farmers' testimonies, there are a lot of interventions that have been put in place. And there are a lot of trainings that has been facilitated, demonstrations, field visits to get farmers to exposed to different CSA practices. However, adoption of CSA practices still remain as the key issue. There's maybe even when you go maybe to visits, if you read our reports, what we've done, that's what you can see on the ground. You could see that adoption is still the key issue. So for me, whenever we design projects, we need to also take into consideration the factors that will ensure that farmers are adopting whatsoever that we are trying to teach them and to train them to do. And also, what are the challenges that are hindering them from adopting, so that we don't just tick the boxes of saying, we train you to do this and do that, but we not take into consideration that what are the other challenges that they are facing when they're trying to implement the initiatives or the practices that we're trying to put on the ground. Yes, that will be my lesson. Just to go with the farmers until they are mature, then we can just let them continue.
I will be slightly biased because I work with Ketu. So just to also add on to what Ketu has said, I think my takeaway point from today's occasion was the fact that the farmers are excited to adopt what is being presented to them, other than us prescribing what the farmers should do. So the most important thing that I saw was the excitement in implementing what they saw was happening and what they thought was making things work. For instance, if to give an example, we learned today that lantana camara, if you boil it, you can use it to spray and it avoids pests. So that's one quite interesting thing. The other thing was the irrigation. Water is a challenge. They are using small 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola with small holes to let the water drip into the soil. So these are some of the key highlights that are more or less not too scientific, not too out of the gray box, but very implementable and working. We saw very good cabbages. There was one spinach that was grown in a compost kind of like structure. You have soil that is built into something, a structure like a drum, and you have spinach all over around. That is smart agriculture for me. Thank you. That was worth it.
Yeah, and then just to note, before I come into this gentleman, is that the project itself, it was embedded on the IKS, Indigenous Knowledge System. So we really relied on the Indigenous Knowledge System when we implementing the project.
Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Abulele from Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. I think these two gentlemen have stolen my thunder because my main highlight, if I should say, was, what came out in terms of the indigenous knowledge and going forward to suggest that that knowledge should be harnessed and perhaps replicated going forward. Very interestingly enough, one of the highlights that I can say is a win that makes this project very successful. It's very difficult to find communities that are so passionate and committed to such projects. You really wish you could take that energy and replicate it wherever such programs are taking place, because buy-in and ownership then becomes a very difficult thing to achieve, especially with the different groups that are involved in the community, from your traditional leadership, political leadership, the youth, and the value add is not seen in the same way by everyone in the community. So from my side, it is to congratulate that community on taking advantage of the support they've received and making sure they pick up the baton and continue forward. Like I said, these gents stole my thunder, but I believe that it's for a good reason. Thanks.
I'm very sorry about that, but it just, I couldn't hold myself because the project itself, we always preach on this. Prof. Mama would always preach on the IKS.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vulindlela from the PDMC office. My one is not really a question, it's just a recommendation, because hearing the others that have visited KwaZulu-Natal, it's just sparked some interest, because being in the disaster office, and they talked about early warning systems like your lightning detectors and stuff. It would have been a good idea if the project was much longer. Also, if the Indaba was maybe about 2 weeks, so that we are able to visit the other sites and experience it for ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think it forms part of the recommendations of this Indaba.
Greetings, colleagues. My name is Vulindlela from AFRA, and I was part of the group that went to Swayimane. Also, just a recommendation, the project might be ending, but it's no accident that there's Indaba with multiple stakeholders. So I think this should be a platform of creating linkages, alignments, and mustn't be taken for granted. And another thing that I'd like to add is seeing, I think Uputi did mention how the community comes together. So seeing the unity, because Mama mentioned in one of the area that within this portion, there's Uganda, within this portion, there's Ugas, but they're all within one area and they're working together. So big ups, and yeah, but let it not end, but hopefully within the stakeholders that are present, that there is room to grow. And thank you to Mama for welcoming us, the enthusiasm, The boom energy, it was amazing. Siyabonga kakhulu.
No, sibonge kakhulu. Due to time, I will move along with my program. Go to slide 2, which is Vulindlela. Maybe we did not share the story. I think now I feel like I'm in a right place to share the story of Vulindlela. Vulindlela, it's one of the interesting sites, socially, politically. So it was very interesting to work at Vulindlela. I, as a person, was thrown into deep end to start working there, and I've learned a lot, and it has helped me to grow. Hence, I've said there are social problems, there are political problems, and in order for us to implement the project, we have to navigate all those things. And I'm happy now that we were able to achieve what we wanted to achieve at Vulindlela. And then also the interventions there. Also, it's very close to my heart. The ecological infrastructure. Yeah, there was the intervention that we did at Vulindlela. And then on top of that is the capacity building and that we did there. It is amazing. It is amazing. But I'll let Kumbu just to share what we saw today, and then also maybe from the group that went to Vulindlela, maybe they will add, and then also add some comment. Over to you, Kumbu. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my name is Kumbuzile Ngobo, and I'd like to say that I was also very excited to go to this project site, because Nami, it was my first time seeing all the things that you guys were seeing today in my group. So I was also very excited, and please feel free to help me out even with the pronunciation of some of the terms, because they were really confusing me. So yeah, just to be brief, we went to Vulindlela to see all the ecological infrastructure interventions. We started at, we went to the grazing area there. I must say, when we arrived there, a lot of us were very surprised. What are we doing here? It looked empty, as if nothing had been done there, but wow. When Bridget and the INR team started explaining, it was really fantastic to find out how so many things have been done there. But if you're looking with the naked eye, it seems like nothing has been done there. Okay, so we went to the grazing area there, and we started off at the hard infrastructure, which was the when. Where? Yes, yes, the concrete where. Yes, thank you so much. We went to the where, and Bridget explained how this infrastructure was put there to assist with the intense storm and heavy rains that usually happen there, which cause soil erosions and all those things there. So they had to put that infrastructure to assist with that, to slow down the water and to have other interventions there. Okay, don't worry. My people, you'll get your turn to elaborate on the things that we saw, if you feel that I'm not explaining well. Okay, the second intervention we saw was, we had a debate whether it was a hard intervention or a soft intervention, where they built a fence. They fenced the spring to protect the spring, so that the cattle that graze there, or the animals that graze there, don't have access to that spring, but only the community members have access to that spring. And then the third place we went to, same place, still the grazing area. Okay, they made us, they showed us the human and cattle paths. You know, we usually, when we walking, we usually walk in the same area and we end up creating a path that was never there. So these paths become an issue when there's heavy rain, because that's where some of the water flows and all that. So they put a soft intervention, which is called the reverts. So reverts are these small, should I call them logs or sticks? You will correct me, that don't allow the cattle to walk there. Over and above putting those sticks there, then they put vegetation so that it closes that path. And when the rain comes, then there is no soil erosion caused by those human and animal paths. And then the other one we went to, the other intervention was the earth beam. Earth beam, it's like this place where the water flows, but now they take the soil from the river or the stream. Yes, and then they take that soil and they make like a blockage, a wall. Yes, they make a wall, and over and above putting that wall there, they put vegetation on that wall in order for it to slow down the water flow, to avoid the water velocity from being too high. Slows down the water velocity. I don't know what else I've forgotten. My team will assist me. I have a great team. But those are some of the interventions that we saw there, the ecological infrastructure interventions. Any comments? I know I left out all the discussions and the debates we're having there. If you can, please assist us by elaborating. And also, Bab Kansela, I'd like you to also tell us what you said when we were on our trip. Please repeat that for our other stakeholders who are not there.
Good afternoon. Dennis was talking from Sandy, from the AI for Security project. Just to speak on the WEA specifically, I just want to say my highlight was in seeing hard infrastructure complementing ecological infrastructure, which is something that our project really puts a lot of emphasis on, especially because over time with the siltation happening, it created wetland and increased the groundwater table over time. And that's not something that was part of the plans in the engineering, but it's just something that was a bonus, a cherry on top, basically, a byproduct of the WEA itself. So yeah, that's my highlight.
Hi everyone, Nhlazuka. I'm here as a student. So my highlight of Vulindlela and what I personally noticed is that as a project, we still need a platform where we can enable a co-creation of different knowledge systems. As much as we are coming from different groups within a society, we might assume that we all have the same need, because what I've noticed that the ecological infrastructure wasn't so much focused on the water resources such as the springs and the rivers. We're also looking at the grazing land. So you might find that as different groups, we might have different needs. So we all need to come together and be able to understand our environments from a holistic approach. We need to be able to harness indigenous knowledge of the local communities so that we can be able to enable sustainability of whatever projects we implement in the area. So that's what I've noticed, that we still, I wouldn't say we're still lacking a platform where we can come together and co-create the different knowledge systems, but we still need to work on it as much as we are working on our physical interventions. We need more investments on the social components as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Tlabati. Oh, Babka.
Thank you. Another point which came out strong was the need to go back to Vulindlela and have an engagement with the community there, so that post-project implementation, we are assured of sustainability. Because a lot of investment went into the project. And if we don't have that solid, strong buy-in, then we're going to lose out on all that good work. So it's something that as stakeholders, we need to think around in terms of how we are going to go back to make sure that people understand the amount of work that was done in that place. So we need to agree on how we can go back to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Bab Gambo. I'll start with Mbali and then.
Good afternoon, Mbali Goke from KZN Etia. I think for me, first of all, it was good to be back on the project site because I was involved in the planning of some of the work that got implemented there just for a little while. So I was very interested to then go back and see how those hard structures are performing. And I can safely say the interventions are intact and they are actually doing what they were designed to do. However, like we discussed on site, at the moment, they merely outputs. It's going to take a little time to then be able to confidently say they are achieving the objectives for which they were planned and implemented. And that's an important conversation to also have with community members, because depending on what they are using the stream for, their perception of why those interventions are there are likely to vary. Linking to what Utabani is suggesting regarding the sustainability plans, it's quite important that those are in place and they are clear in terms of how the local structures that will take over the project once it closes, how they engage, who they engage, because with the hard infrastructure, you then need to have a maintenance plan, because much as it's concrete, it is prone to damage by floods, but also in that area where you have livestock grazing, there is a big potential that, you know, the animals will destabilize the soil around, especially the arms of those concrete structures, and make them even more prone to flood damage. Thanks.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you. My name is Toza Mele. I'm with Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife. I think the both speakers that spoke before me have covered the areas that I wanted to touch, because it's linked to the issue of sustainability. One of the discussions that came out strongly during our time there is that there is a need for consultation. We need to invest enough time to consult with the land users or with the communal members before the implementation of the project, so that things such as sustainability or the ongoing monitoring of the project can be incorporated within the plan before the actual implementation. And then also it brings across the point, the fact that people can also raise their own opinions and perceptions about the projects, about their own needs, about what they think about the project that is being brought to them. That actually allows them to feel as part of the project, so that develop a sense of ownership, so that when the time comes to hand over the project, if that time ever comes, people are already feel like they're part of that project. So it makes things a bit easier at that point. Thank you.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Louis Ove from FAO. That is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the site, but it's nice to listen to the conversation now, what happened and what people saw. I was two things I think that are quite of interest to me. The first one is the indigenous knowledge systems that was referred to by the earlier speaker. I would like to know if there are any of those indigenous knowledge approaches and practices that were suggested to address the same challenges that are being addressed by the introduced practices that we're talking about today. So it's about, do we have any indigenous throughout the process, what you have been doing so far? Did you indigenous practices and processes that can help alleviate the problems that we are facing? The issue of sustainability, in my view, I think before these structures were put in place, should have been discussed already. It shouldn't be discussed at this stage. And working on it, imagine if you were to find that the communities have no plan for handling all the things that you have put in place going forward, it might not be the best thing to do. Should have been discussed from the very beginning, and an exit plan should have been at the end when the project was actually starting. That's what I would just say about that. Thank you.
Over to you, ma'am.
I was also part of the people who went to the site there at Vulindlela, and one of the things that came out strongly was the issue of things take time, and we need to acknowledge that the first year of the project is actually a year of trial and error. A lot of planning needs to happen because while we were there, Bridget, which is one of the implementers of the project, I forgot where she works, mentioned that they had tried a lot of things before, and then they realized that although they had tried to use examples from elsewhere, they needed to design systems that are particularly tailor-made for the landscape as it is, because it's a peri-urban landscape and it's not necessarily identical or similar to any other landscape. And there's also the people challenges, like, dealing with rangelands. There are complex biophysical systems which have a lot of social issues embedded in them, because we also learned that there are livestock farmers and there are also crop farmers, or people who are not even farming at all, who also have a bearing on the use of rangelands. So as much as the livestock farmers want to keep the rangelands to themselves, other people are doing developments in the rangelands, and they're reducing the size of the grazing area, which is important to also note, because one of the interventions that the project wanted or didn't want was that they're not going to put fences, but only to find out that the communities wanted fences. And the issue of fencing is not just fencing for controlling of grazing, but it's also the issue of controlling the grazing area itself. So that's very important that we also take note of what the communities are communicating to us, because they live in those landscapes and they understand the challenges that are coming from those landscapes as they are dealing with different people who are not particularly concerned with the interventions that the projects are coming to implement. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you so much. There's a hand here. I don't know, Ketiwe, maybe after the lady, maybe you can talk a little bit on indigenous knowledge system, the work that the UKZN has done around that, and then also whether our farmers have been using that indigenous knowledge system after the landing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Indaba, and I'm from the Eastern Cape Department of Economic Development, Environmental Affairs and Tourism. In Xhosa, I would say, I wanted to say that one of the things which I have learned is that we cannot be in a position to replicate or say we are going to replicate the interventions that are being done at Vulindlela in some other areas because of your different landscapes and in terms of your rangeland management and practices thereof. Because that particular area is a peri-urban or semi-urban area, because we did make examples in terms of interventions that are being done within the uMngeni catchment around Matatiel, wherein you'd find that in that particular area, the area is deeply rural. People practice livestock farming, and thus even your grassland that is there, the animals are able, your cattle, to graze on such a landscape. And thus it is not an easy thing to say perhaps that we can replicate what is being done in some other areas. Also with your spring protection, one other thing that was mentioned was the issue of testing the quality of the water, because the water is being used by people and not by animals. And perhaps there must be a study or something to make sure that diseases such as your E. coli are not there, so that what people are drinking, then we make sure that in terms of quality, there's water quality. However, because at present there is no water, and then, okay, this system is bringing some water to the people, then yeah, people are using the water in as much as we haven't really tested whether the water is qualitative or not. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no, thanks. I will, due to time, because there's a video from Swayimane that we need to see, I will give Ketiwe to respond and then give lastly to Councillor Ngubane, and then we will watch the video. Over to you, Ketiwe.
Okay, so for those who we were with in the field, when we first talk about, we also talk about the aspects of disseminating information, weather information to farmers through SMSs. So on our SMS structure, we normally tell the farmers what they should expect weather-wise, the projections according to source, and then we make recommendation on what farmers should do in order for them to be ready for whatsoever climate condition that is coming. Based on the recommendations that we always do, we rely a lot on indigenous knowledge. So initially we're having pest and disease management trainings, as well as soil and water management trainings. That is where we're extracting a lot of information on how do farmers really cope with this, all these challenges on their own before the projects came. So we documented a lot of those strategies, and when we send SMSs to them, we tell them this is what is projected, and then we put recommendations on what you should do. What we acknowledge with that is that even sharing a farmer, there is still a lack of farmer to farmer information sharing. You find that the other farmer is doing other practices while the other farmer is not doing. So we are also trying to disseminate the indigenous knowledge within the communities, because we can't assume that they all know all the information. Yeah. So we disseminate indigenous knowledge as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Ketiwe. With the issue of SMS, I still receive those SMS. Yeah, one thing I like about those SMS, it's written in the language that is spoken in the area. So I think with those warnings that we get from source, they also have their own ways. They'll receive an SMS and then they'll tell you, no, Lindo, we knew it was going to rain. We knew. Bona, they're using their indigenous knowledge system. Bab Council, just a few and then few words.
Sanibonani. Ngithokoza ukuthola leli thuba
umshushisi oBringubane, iward councillor Semsunduzi, ward 8 kwaMpumuza. Ngizocela nje ukukhuluma ngesiZulu usisikhumbu uzongitranslate ngolimi leli labomdabu. Ngicela ukukhuluma official language yami. Angizoba mude kakhulu kodwa engingaqala ngako nje iloko ukuthi umsebenzi siwubonile lapha kwaVundlela kwaMpumuza ward 80 endaweni yaseKhokhwane. Siwubonile umsebenzi kade siyingxenye yeproject ngenkathi iqala ukufika iyaziwa nakomkhulu la kwaMpumuza enkosini nasenduneni. Umsebenzi esiwubonile uhambe kahle nalabade sihamba nabo babonile. Into ebinkinga kakhulu engizoyibalula isemakhaya lapha kuba nabantu abadala othi noma zenziwe zonke lezi zinto ezibaliwe la bangaziboni. Kodwa uma usuyakhona lezi zinto ezivele zenziwa uyanotice ukuthi umsebenzi ube muhle, zikhona inguquko ezenzekile. Kube nesicelo esicelwe amaMpumuza bathi bayacela ukuthi kufakwe ucingo ukuze inkomo zihambe endaweni yazo zingayi emgaqweni. Kade ngingeve ngoba ukushintsha inhlelo ezivele zikhona. Kade siyiconcern ukuthi inkomo azidle endaweni yazo. So umsebenzi wonke nje owenzekile lapha kwaVundlela muhle. Esingakufisa ukuthi akube into eqhubekayo ngoba ukhona umehluko ovele usukhona. Ngingama kanjalo ngokwesikhathi ngoba mangakulanda konke kuningi kakhulu. Siyabonga kakhulu.
Okay, this is my first opportunity where I've been asked to translate. I'll summarize what the councillor has said. He says they've been there since the inception of the project and they are very happy with the work that has happened there. All they ask is that the work continues after the project comes to its end. Does anyone want to elaborate on what the councillor said and help me translate? Or they request that we fence for them to control the grazing. I told you to translate. To control the grazing in the area there, with Ward 8, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, the councillor was also saying that they would like to have some fencing so that the cattle would not end up being hit by cars on the road because cattle often loiter on the road in the area.
Thanks. Just to respond to the last request of the councillor, I think that's happening. It's happening. We are going to have a fence at the grazing land. It's a grazing area. It's Vulindlela. I think the process has already started in terms of the recruitment of people who are going to help us in terms of installing that fence. Think due to time, we're still going to be here tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of discussions. Even on Friday, it's going to be a lot of discussions. Let's hold it here, and then I will maybe screen a video from Swayimane, and then I think after that we can go and freshen up, and then come and see me in my white suit and red shirts. Yeah.
So the South African National Biodiversity Institute, or SANBI, was nominated to be accredited with the Adaptation Fund by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment to act as the national designated authority of the Adaptation Fund in South Africa. Once SANBI was accredited, South Africa had access to $10 million to program to support the building of climate resilience of vulnerable communities in the country. SANBI ran a process to call for ideas from across the country, from all sectors and in all parts of all provinces. And one of two projects that were selected was the uMngeni Resilience Project, which is a $7.5 million project to build the adaptive capacity of vulnerable communities in the uMngeni district municipality.
The strategic objectives for the district is to assist in providing climate prevention before occurrences and assist in reporting early warnings, fire detections, building the climate resilience of rural communities by climate proofing houses, stormwater drainage, as well as channels and low levels river crossing. Also, the issue of employment opportunities. And we've been grateful as uMngeni district municipalities, especially on the municipalities within our district that have been beneficiaries to this particular project.
In terms of the URP as a project, it is a cross-cutting project which calls for an integrated climate change adaptation approach. So by its design, the project was always integrated. For example, component 1 speaks to early warning systems. Component 2 speaks to built infrastructure and ecological infrastructure. Component 3 speaks to climate smart agriculture. And the fourth component speaks to mainstreaming lessons learned. And if you look at these 3 or 4 components, they might seem disjointed to you, but they're actually very well integrated. And I think that was one of the unique things about the URP, that it understood and contextualized the complexity of climate change and the realities of climate change, which are really cross-cutting and therefore need these integrated approaches if you are going to deliver meaningful impact at a scale.
community ground-based near real-time lightning warning system was installed within the community of Swayimane. So what the system actually did was basically disseminate using audible and visible alarm systems. So the lightning warning system consisted of a siren and a beacon lights in that regard. And what was also quite unique about the system was that it could take it a step ahead and automate written notifications by SMSs as well as emails at nominated action or threat level. And in doing so, what this would do is that it would provide, for example, the rural communities, your farmers on the ground, as well as municipal officials and disaster management officials with some sort of a measurable threshold upon which they could then react to on site.
The specific site at Swayimane High School was absolutely perfect for the measurement of lightning. It's located on this ridge with these valleys running down onto the sides. And a ridge is an area that is particularly prone to lightning and where you're most likely to get your ground strikes. So it made the value in installing the system very relevant. And particularly because you've got a high density of population, people at the school, where, in terms of the number of people we're covering, there was good value for the investment in the URP project.
The main aim of the project was to develop a real-time and focusing early warning system for uMngeni District Municipality. And the anticipated outcome was then that the system will then be able to inform decision-making of the disaster management in terms of how to respond effectively in terms of flood management. So it will inform their flood mitigation planning. The three components of the real-time monitoring system includes the rainfall runoff model, which is where the flows are simulated or modeled. And the second part of the system is the Mike Workbench, which is actually a decision support system with a database where then the rainfall runoff model is integrated to real-time information and the forecasted information. And then there's also Mike operations. It's part of the system which then represents the results or the outputs of the system, and you can actually view the actual outputs of the system in that component of the system. But the other component, which is also very important, was the flow gauges that had to be installed in the rivers, because in the pilot areas, we had to identify suitable sites in the rivers where we can be able to receive flow information that will also be feeding into the system.
Component 2 of the uMngeni Resilience Project focuses on the built environment and ecological infrastructure. There is a need within the community to understand what sustainability is about, finding new ways of building, the use of building materials in a sustainable way, or even the rejection of materials that have been used for years that are basically more a problem than a solution. So component 2 included the retrofitting of 300 homesteads under sustainable principles, 10 kilometers of storm water channels, 5 water crossing bridges, 150 kilometers of fire breaks, 50 hectares of invasive species removal, a rangeland management plan. The project basically tackles the hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and a very important aspect of the project was capacity building within the area, within the community. There was a number of workshops that were conducted in terms of basically building up knowledge around sustainability. We're grateful that we had the chance to collaborate with highly qualified stakeholders such as researchers from the UKZN, the Duzi uMngeni Conservation Trust, and the Institute of Natural Resources.
We've worked both here at Vulindlela as well as at Nhlazuka.
Our focus here at Vulindlela has been on rangeland management. So working with the team to come up with a rangeland management plan, working mainly with the Dip Tank Association and looking at ways to manage it in a more sustainable way. We introduced a rotational rest system whereby 25% of the grazing area is rested in any 1 year for a full growing season. That's from basically once the rains start in spring until the first frosts in around May. And the idea is that that gives the grass a chance to recuperate, and it also means that fodder is then available for the animals to eat in winter. And then because we were resting rangeland, we realized that we needed to also protect it from fire. So we've also were involved with burning fire breaks around the rested areas, just to make sure that that feed wasn't lost, because otherwise obviously it would be a huge impact for livestock owners.
Component 3 is focusing on building resilience to smallholder farmers to cope with climate change. We are looking at trying to increase their yields as well as link them with markets, register them into cooperatives and link them with potential markets and formalize a partnership between them and markets. The third objective is also looking at mainstreaming climate smart agricultural practices with the ongoing activities. For instance, like looking at other projects that are trying to projects with the same objective and try to link with them, link with extension officers. We're working with smallholder farmers who are growing vegetables and crops, and they're mostly planting their vegetables and crops primarily for their household consumption, and they sell the surplus to the market. Most of them are female, and most of them, the household within the community is female-headed. Most garden setting that we have here, we have community gardens as well as individual farmers who are planting or growing their crops at their household.
My main job was to assist in the design of energy smart and climate smart agricultural water management interventions. Our irrigation system obtains or abstracts water from a nearby borehole source that is powered by a couple of solar panels, which is your green energy and an energy smart intervention. So this pump conveys water to a JoJo tank in each field, and this JoJo tank has a capacity of about 10,000 liters. And from the JoJo tank to the field, it's all gravity-fed drip irrigation systems. So the system at Swayimane combines a whole bunch of climate smart interventions, energy, water, and knowledge smart, because we also encourage farmers to interact from different gardens. In addition to our interventions at the gardens, we are pro-green technologies and interventions. This is evidenced by a demo greenhouse plot that we established at Swayimane High School. This system harvests water from the school roofs into a JoJo tank, and it's gravity fed to the greenhouses where they do seedling production, tomato production, etc. We are for climate smart interventions, we are for stakeholder engagement, and we are for contextualized and bespoke interventions so that everything that we do and implement is fit for purpose and it's an intervention that doesn't fail.
Today here at uMngeni Primary School, we're here to raise awareness on climate change and extreme weather conditions. The reason we're here, as you can see, it's raining today. and we're approaching winter, so we have to raise the awareness on how to live under the conditions of climate change, because it's no longer a myth.
In projects, basically it's a climate change project.
Sekuba nomoya nangayiphi season. There is the impacts of climate change. A sign yokuthi climate change is no longer a myth.
It is very important and critical that young people are educated about climate change, especially at an early age, so that they get to know as to the do's and don'ts, and then you give them basic principles to say that if you faced with situations like this, then this is how you need to respond.
This launch was very, very successful. We look at the attendance of umphakathi, looking at the attendance of the stakeholders, looking at the coordination of the actual event. We were graced by the leadership, traditional leadership of this area in Nhlazuka, who had graced us. We had Izinduna, we had a representative of the local chief who was also here.
Community buy-in is important when implementing projects like this, as we have been fostering community involvement. You cannot implement a successful community project without the involvement of the people. We've been working closely with the ward councillors within the affected municipalities, as well as the traditional leadership that exists, because most of these areas are rural.
Having the University of KwaZulu-Natal as an implementing partner on the uMngeni Resilience Project has been fantastic. The academic rigor that a university brings to a project like this is really appreciated by both ourselves and the funders. The fact that the university brings a research element to the work and applies that rigor to everything it does creates an environment where an evidence base is created, which is appreciated by SANBI and reporting back to the fund. The additional resources that the university has been able to bring to the project have also been really, really valuable in making sure that the project not only delivers on what it is contracted to do so, but extends beyond that and extends to other areas that wouldn't have been possible to achieve without the additional support that the university has been able to bring to the project.
My master's study was looking at how adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices affects farmers' welfare. How does it influence their livelihood? It's an encouraging environment to study, and it's also encouraging to bridge that gap between the researchers and the farmers. There's a lot of information that have been published, and which can be very useful to farmers, which end up not reaching to the farmers. There's also a lot of indigenous knowledge that is important on the ground, which also doesn't reach to the researchers.
Thanks to the URP, I was able to actually produce a PhD thesis on this instrumentation, which was quite an honor and privilege because it's such an amazing system, and I was able to then look at the data in terms of what's happening with the system on the ground. How is it measuring what it's meant to?
One of the fantastic things about the URP project is that there was implementation and interaction with communities. In the research world and in academia, we so often get caught up in our own spaces, and we do our little bit of research and we have findings and we write them up and they get published somewhere on the internet, and they add no value to the people on the ground, communities in the country.
And as we are coming to the end of the URP after 8 long years, of which the project was initially planned to be 5, a clear lesson and a big call is, the URP had a budget of $7.5 million. And I keep telling people that it's a drop in the ocean compared to the scale and the enormity of the challenge. Whilst we have been successful in piloting, useful interventions, these really need to be scaled up and replicated if we are to achieve the sort of impact that is needed to shift, the paradigms and to really take people's lives and make them resilient to climate change. So whilst there are lessons that have been learned from the URP in terms of what works, that integrated approaches work, that building from the bottom and community-based approaches work, that systemic approaches are needed to addressing complex challenges, the scale of the investment also needs to match the ambition. And I think as we go forward and as we venture into new areas and solicit new projects, we really need to match the ambition with the right level of budget. We need to be broad-based and inclusive, make sure that everyone is part of the conversations in the beginning. It's harder to bring people into the conversation later on when it has already started. It's easy to start off with everyone and build momentum from the word go. So those are some of the lessons that we are learning and taking from the URP and hoping also to scale these across the region. Because climate change is not just a South African issue, it's a global issue. We have a responsibility in this generation to ensure that we leave this planet habitable and enjoyable for future generations that are going to come after us. We have a responsibility not just to ourselves, not just to our children, but their children and those who shall come hundreds of years long after we've gone. We should be remembered as the generation that stood and made a decision to say, not in our time and not in future's time will we allow
me in my white suit. And yeah, please do come. Everyone is everyone is welcome. With those words, see you at the gala dinner. Thank you so much. Thanks.